I bring this up to tell you where AI can be so useful. If instead of you as a physician, there was a platform that had already collected a lot of this information beforehand, then you as a physician can now spend 15 minutes of eye contact with the patient. And that is what physicians were supposed to do to be able to help patients, not document things.
Win all in, play my cards right. Up the ante, one blackjack all night. Roll the dice, let it ride. Water the odds, I got snake eyes.
Entrepreneur Perspectives is produced by Quiet Loud Studios, a production company and content network. Learn more at quietloudstudios.com. So you're in the Bay Area, but I also know you spend a lot of time probably in New York City. You had gone to grad school at NYU. Where did you do undergrad?
So I grew up in India, Eric, and I went to medical school in India. And med school in India is right after, high school. And then you go 6-year med school, and then you go to residency fellowship and so on and so forth. So I did my med school in India, and then I did my internship residency fellowship, as well as a graduate degree in healthcare finance and management, all from NYU.
Okay. So what year was that you came to the United States?
It was end of 97.
97. Okay. And when you came here, did you have family here?
No, I came alone. I came to do my residency or medical training.
Okay. Has family since come with you over to the United States? Or are you traveling back and forth? What is that like?
My wife and I were here, and I have a brother who also is based out of here. And my parents come back and forth. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Excellent. When you look at education today, and obviously you're well educated, you spent a lot of years in school, and obviously you're seeing what's going on both in the Bay Area and New York City and just across the country. As you're talking to maybe it's young kids, or as you're just thinking about it yourself and watching the news, like what comes to mind for you when it comes to higher education?
I think our education systems are great. I think where sometimes the education system does not address the issue which relates to what I'll talk specifically about medical education. So, because that's what I'm familiar with. And so I think what it doesn't help you to think about, it does not help you to think. I don't mean that they have to choose for you, but whenever I had a chance to spend time with my medical residents or medical students, I wanted to ask them, what do you want to become? The part that I started saying earlier, that the education system does not help you think about the career choices. It's not that once you're going to medical school, so obviously you become a physician, but what type of physician you want to become, where do you want to practice, and what type of setting you want to practice. And specifically, if you were doing a fellowship, do you want to do a fellowship? Do you want to not do a fellowship? Because fellowship is not necessary in order to practice medicine. And then also which type of city, which type of location you want to live in. These are important considerations. It does not mean that you make a choice, you cannot change it, but it also means that you cannot graduate from medical residency training and hope and wish the day you graduate, the next day you have your dream job available to you. And I think that disconnect, even though these are medical students, they're really bright and smart to get into medical school, but the system is so focused on didactic curriculum that sometimes we fail to help the students to understand that they have to think about creatively and thoughtfully about who they want to become. And that's where a lot of my time is spent. I talk to healthcare entrepreneurs, and sometimes a CEO of a medical device company or a healthcare digital health company maybe is struggling about what they want to do with the company. But I also think that is consistent with who you want to become year 2, 3 down the road, right? Because who you want to become then helps you how you want to get there. And I think that is something, Eric, I feel that it requires people to have a dialogue. And I think our students are bright, but sometimes there is an assumption that because I have a training, I completed medical residency from NYU, for example, I will have a job in Midtown Manhattan the very next day. And I think that is where the disconnect is. And that's where there's an opportunity that I found that I could help people.
Yeah. So you're looking at it almost mentoring, that you just said, have that dialogue with these students. because it's like they have this, they've read stuff online, they've listened to podcasts, read books, or just heard from people, well, this is what you have to do. But then it's like, well, let's sit down with people who can actually, who've been through the process and who are teaching the process that can help you understand it. Is that right?
Right. And also ask them very specific example that if a second year medical resident, and let's say the residency is for 3 years, if the resident is in second year of their training and they don't think about what type of a job and where they want to work, a year from now, a year and a half from now, they will not get there. So I asked them, tell me where you would like to be on July 1st, because medical residencies are typically start July 1 or 3 years. So let's just say if I'm talking to somebody today in 2025 and it's May of 2025, I would ask them, where would you like to be on July 1, 2026? That's when you finish your residency. Your residency ends on June 30th, 2025. Where would you like to be in July 1, 2025? They said, gee, I never thought about it. I said, let's think about it together. Maybe next time I am with you on a call, because I covered as an attending physician and as a faculty on the weekend at the hospital. And the same resident is on call. I would ask him, okay, so we talked about this last time. So tell me where you would like to be on July 1, 2026. And if they say, look, Dr. Gupta, I would like to be a practicing physician in New York City, I would say, okay, could we be more specific? Could you tell me where in New York City you would like to be? And then I would ask them, can you work backward? So when would you need to start to talk to people about the job? When would you like to have your applications ready? And what it does, this seems very simple process, but what it does is that it helps them to think about where they want to go and then work backward about doing the process. So didactic curriculum is very helpful. And like I said, medical institutions, I'm talking again for medical residents, but it's true for anybody. It helps you to become a great doctor. But if it does not help you to figure out what type of a person you would like to be, then it takes away the opportunity for you to find your own happiness. And I don't mean that everybody has to do the one thing and one thing only. People have different priorities. And as people have talked about it, happiness is very subjective. What makes one person happy may not be the same for another person. But asking this question about who you want to become and helping you to become that person is something I think the schools and the faculty can do a slightly more proactive job of it.
Are you finding practicing doctors looking back and saying, I didn't plan this out. Now I'm in this position where I'm not happy. I don't want to be doing this because they didn't have these conversations. Maybe they're 30, 40, 50 years old at this point, and they're like, how did I get here?
I would say some of those interactions that I had when I was in my training, I asked my faculty, I asked them one simple question. If you have to do it all over it again, would you do what you're doing today? And unfortunately, in my interaction, many of the responses said, no, I won't. And then I would keep asking, so why not? And then I would ask, what would you do? And that's where it helped me to figure out my career choices. And look, it's very subjective. So it's very hard to generalize a statement that most people are not happy or most people are happy. I think it's not just true about being a physician, it's true about being an entrepreneur also. People have this, for lack of a better word, a fantasy that they want to be entrepreneur. It is a job that requires you to deal with a lot of uncertainty, and it does not always pan out to that well. It's not that every startup will succeed and be successful. Intellectually, we know that the risks are enormously high, but human mind has this wishful thinking that I hope that mine is one that works out. And I am not discouraging anyone not to be an entrepreneur, because I always say that, why would I say this to you? But I am asking you this question. Is this you're willing to endure it? And if they are, then that is the right thing for you. And endurance doesn't come from a goal of having a job, a career, or making financial returns, but it comes from something that you, as an individual, find meaningful for you to do it, right? So that's where the conundrum comes down to. It is not limited to being a medical doctor. It's not limited to being an entrepreneur. It is something that you have to find your passion on, and it's okay not to know it. It's completely okay, because I didn't know. I had to figure this out as I went along the way. So I also tell people this is completely normal to not know exactly what you want to do, but you have to have a directional intention. Being unintentional does not help.
Yeah. Do you think it comes a lot from, if kids of my own and you watch through high school and it's about, first a lot of getting good grades, getting into the best college, picking your major. I mean, these are 17, 18-year-olds and you're talking about what do they want to do? How would they even know? They've never taken classes in certain things to even know what exists out there. My son took a sociology class and he had no idea about that, right? He never heard of that beforehand. And then you get into it, you're like, oh wow, that was fascinating. Doesn't mean you have to go into that career path, but it just starts opening your eyes and say, oh wow, there's a lot more out here. Then you go to college, then you go, then okay, now I'm going to go to med school and do residency. And next thing you know, it's 6, 7, 8 years pass by and you're in this path, but it started long before. And you're talking a lot about pausing, reflecting, journaling, having conversations with you and then with themselves, right? Did you see that? Is that the path that it's almost being outlined for you?
Absolutely. And I also encourage them that, for example, I'll stay with this philosophy, but as you can see, this can be expanded into many different directions. So another example I'll give you, imagine, as you pointed out about your kids and your son going to college. Let's just say there's a student who's in college and they really want to be a physician. Wonderful. The simple ask is that why don't you go and talk to a couple of physicians over the summer or shadow somebody, see what type of work they do. Is this what you would like to do? And if this is truly you would like to do, because look, you are absolutely correct. Until somebody goes to medical school, they will not become a doctor. But the question is that if you are going to spend several $100,000 of your money and be on a student loan and spend 4 years of your life into medical school, it will be worthwhile for you as a person who is pursuing that career to talk to at least a couple of physicians whom you know or whom you can get to know. If you enjoy being a ER doctor, it will behoove you to at least find one ER doctor and talk to him or her and ask them, do they really love their job? And if they really love their job, what about their job they like? What about their job they don't like? So there are 5 or 6 set of questions, very basic questions. Like I said to you, Eric, earlier, that I asked the question to my colleagues, my faculty, may not be colleagues at the time, but more of the faculty that I looked up to. Would you do this all over again if you get a chance? And that's where this starts to help you to clarify. What is important is to not feel caught. You have to feel that you're not stuck. You have to own your destiny. No matter who you are, no matter where you are, you can make a choice, right? I mean, as a human being, the one of the greatest gifts we are given is to gift of making a choice. So consciously making that choice, but also understanding that, sure, I don't have all the facts, but knowing what I know, I really don't think I want to be ER doctor. Then the question goes out to be, do you want to be a physician? And you talk to 5 more physicians. It's not dependent on what I think. It's dependent on you going and talking to X number of people. So you get diversity of viewpoints. And then you figure out, is that what I like doing it? If you have talked to 5 ER docs and they all said to you that they love the fact they can take care of a patient and once they have done, they have saved lives and their shifts are only 12 hours long and they have a few days on, few days off. If this is what you enjoy doing it, then you have found something that you like about your job and it will give you not only direction, but it will give you the inspiration to do what you do, right? You see what I'm saying? Because it's not just a question about the job and career and making money and have a job security. It's about, I call it human potentiality. I understand it's a higher cost, but, and you don't have to find it day one if you're going to college, but potentially you start to get there where your internal compass is aligned with where you want to go. And the same thing as being an entrepreneur. If something for some reason you found this is not working for you, you can. It's not that you have to remain an entrepreneur. You can go back to working in a big organization. I talked to you about being a physician. Let me share with you an idea about when I was thinking about my career and quitting my full-time work at Genentech. I went and talked to some of the folks who worked at Genentech, and I was very, very surprised that some of these people gave me their unbiased opinion. They say, Shalabh, if you went and left Genentech and you did something you truly believe in, and even if you did not succeed, 2 years down the road, you would have gained far more experience than you have today. And for someone like you, I would be very happy to hire you back at Genentech. I never went back to Genentech. I never had to look for a job. But what it did for me to realize that no matter what the outcome is in doing this work, I don't have to be so concerned. And that part it starts to, of course, I think there's a lot to be said about this culture of entrepreneurship that existed at Genentech. And I was fortunate to talk to people who not only did the job at Genentech, but also they loved what they did. They were folks, I don't want to name them, but they were people who were involved in bringing drugs like Herceptin on the market, and they were the leaders of the organization. And there are stories, and there is a movie at Genentech that talks about how patients were, you know, struggling, or, they were so desperate for a drug like Herceptin to be on the market as a treatment for breast cancer. And that is the inspiration that continued me to move forward towards a difficult path. But I had a internal compass. I said to myself, this is something I truly believe in. And that helped me to overcome that resistance. And I think that is important no matter what you're doing. Even today, I run Unicycive, which is a publicly traded company. I have a group of mentors. I talk to them. I ask them, how can I become my next version of myself? And how can I take the company to where it needs to go?
Yeah. Yeah. So you're asking these questions and it sounds simple, right? And then you would advise other people to do the same thing. And that sounds great in theory. And I don't know what it is that holds people back from asking that question, because then they feel stuck. So you're at Genentech and there's this fear, which you probably had at one point, to say, well, if I leave here and it doesn't work out, I'm done in this industry. I got to go figure something else out. And then you realize, like, wait, I have this safety net. They're going to bring me back. This is my opportunity to go do this. But I think most people, and it's not a bad thing, it's interesting to say, well, how did you get to that point to say, I'm going to go do this? I mean, obviously you have this entrepreneurial mindset that allows you to take that step where some other people just might not have it, because if I give that up, I potentially give up whatever is attached to that thing. It could be anything. It could be just like how you feel about your job. But you took a Genentech and that catapulted you to other things. That experience you have is something you look fondly upon. And obviously you learned a ton and you had this opportunity and it allowed you to go out there and do the next thing. I talked to someone recently who worked at Google, and they worked at Google at an incredible time until they realized that that was it for them. And they needed to go out there and build their own product, their own company. And they did that, right? You see what I'm getting at.
Absolutely. Eric, I didn't talk to just anybody at Genentech. I talked to the leaders who were at a very, very prominent positions. And they had reached to the point in their career that they were at Genentech at the time, but they were truly, truly inspirational. Their names are known all over the industry. Talking to people like that, you realize that life is short. And I say this to my team also, don't want to waste on doing things that you don't care about. Not because you are just so philosophically driven, but there is an opportunity cost in life. You spend 5 years in doing something you don't want to do it. If you want to be a stronger word, you hate doing it, then you're just wasting the time. I don't want to waste my time. I think we all have a limited time on this planet, and I think we could use that time to build something, to do something that we feel inspired by. So it wasn't so much that I wasn't not afraid, or acknowledging the fact that fear is also normal. It's something important. No one, I don't really care whether you talk to Elon Musk, and people can say that I don't have fear. We all have a degree of fear. The question is, can you do the right thing despite feeling afraid? And when I say right thing, it sounds like there is a wrong thing. No, I mean, can you be afraid, but it's still focus where you want to go? And that is something you have to be an entrepreneur to do that, because we are always challenged, right? You are running a clinical trial, you're running an experiment. There are always things that may not work out, but being aware of the fact there is a risk and mitigating that risk, that is what helps you to then continue to make progress. And it's not just a risk related to the company, but it's also a risk related to your own personal life. If you think about it, when I gave you that example, that idea that when these mentors at Genentech helped me think it through, it gave me the courage to say, hey, you know what? I don't have to get stuck here. And if this is not what I want to do, I can go build something. And I think there is a culture in California, especially in Bay Area. I think that I don't want to say too much about it because it's also growing elsewhere, but I think that is the ability to endure failure and not calling it a failure as a permanent failure, but as a learning experience is something that has to be there in society. Or else people cannot just go out and build things because every company doesn't succeed. Every enterprise doesn't succeed, especially if you're a startup, right? But saying as a society, and this requires a broader consciousness, saying that if Eric, for example, decided to do a startup after a year and a half, it didn't work, saying, Eric, you did something worthwhile, you learned something, and you are far more valuable today than you were 2 years ago. So therefore, Eric, here is a new role for you. And I think Bay Area allows you to. It's not just biotech, it's not just Genentech. Organizations understand that. And that's what gives people courage to take the leap of faith, do the right thing, or take the risk. And sometimes they succeed, sometimes they don't.
Yeah. Sometimes it feels like if you're not surrounded, whether it's your city, your people, your family, whatever, that if you fail, like people question you, right? And I've even talked to people who live in the UK and there's this fear of failure because it's like you're done. If you fail one time, it's like you're a failure and it's over. Or even here, sometimes it's definitely you're given that opportunity. Entrepreneurship's now put on a pedestal where it used to be like, that's weird. You're unemployed basically, right? Or you're unemployable. But yeah, I think there's this, if you can surround yourself with the right people, but you could feel like you're failing in real time almost because social media exists. And even if you're not posting on it, it's just reinforced on a second basis. Do you think coming over here from India, and you said by yourself, like you're building it, like you're callousing yourself, like to go through difficult things, to struggle, to like not maybe know people and where to go and how does the society work, right? Was that an early thing for you that you draw on to say, what am I going to be scared? What am I fearful of? Like, what's the problem?
I think life is multifactorial. So I think where you grew up and who your parents were and what type of society you grew up probably has a role to play. But Eric, for me, the biggest influence in my life came from being a physician and realizing that taking care of people, especially, I keep remembering the days that I spent, and sometimes I would just spend because, if you do internship and ICU training is a part of your rotation, sitting in ICU for several months, because where you're spending your time, if it's a 3-month rotation at ICU, you see people being very vulnerable. You see that life as we know of eventually comes to a pause, an end. May not be end, but you see that we are very similar. It really doesn't matter whether I took care of a very, very affluent Wall Street executive at NYU Hospital. I took care of a homeless person at Bellevue. We are very similar. We suffer similarly, despite our net worth. We have common problems. So that helps you to focus on something deeper. And you realize that one day, not too far in future, you might be here. Hopefully you're in a good place, you're in good health, but we all have to suffer. The suffering is universal. Might as well find meaning in it.
You're talking about resilience a lot too, right? Because you're going to go through something and having someone like you for, let's say, a young physician in their life would be a really big deal, right? No different than the people that you had in your life. And it sounds like you make yourself accessible to them. Even though you've been in a position where you've had a lot of leadership roles, you're running companies, you're very busy. But there's something when I'm talking to you that I just feel like, yeah, this would be someone you'd want to talk to. Like this is who I want my kids talking to and learning from and listening to.
What I'm going to say will sound counterintuitive, but helping people, it's not just helping them. Every conversation, I advise routinely to 1 or 2 companies every quarter. It's a pro bono work I do with the Stanford companies. Eric, when I talk to the CEO of a company that is working not necessarily in biotech, I focus on healthcare, so I don't talk to people who are developing enterprise software. But I'll give you an example, and I would just say at a high level without talking about the company or the CEO. But if I talk to a company that is focused on AI in healthcare, as an example, and in the beginning, the conversation revolves around, okay, so what are you trying to develop? You're trying to develop product. What you realize that their problems are very similar to the ones that I faced running a biotech company. So talking to an entrepreneur, talking to a CEO, it may seem that you are helping them, but you are also realizing these are the same sets of problems that you've once faced. Not only that, if you are willing to take a little bit broader look, you realize by helping them, you are getting a broader perspective. Eric, I think anyone, if you decide to do so, sure, I'm busy. And I, of course, everybody, I always say that being busy is not unique a gift that I have. Everybody is busy. We all have things that we need to do. But finding that time, an hour once every 2 weeks to spend with the CEO to help them overcome their challenges, and then they become really great friends. Eric, I realize that I have learned so much from them as much as I have probably helped them to see their problems. Because when they tell me their problems, it gives me a perspective. The only way to see a perspective when you step out of the situation, but when you're running a company, even in my current organization, it's a publicly traded company, bigger than it used to be. One cannot have a perspective when you are actually in the middle of it. The only way you can get a perspective is when you step out of it. And how do you step out of it? Sometimes by talking to people who are not in your organization. So I think about two ways to think about it. One is the mentors. There are people who have been there, done that. So these are venture capital investors. There are people who are retired CEOs. There are CEOs of the larger organization, much older, both in chronological age, but also from a career point of view. They have had 30, 40 years of experience spending time with them. And similarly, spending time with the younger generation, people who are just starting their company, people who have a graduate degree from Stanford and decided to build a company. They have a different sets of challenges. Those are the two sets of folks on either side, people who are ahead of me, people who are behind me, talking to both of them, keeping an open mind, realizing that you learn from both of them. Those who are ahead of me, they teach me that this problem that I am facing, they have faced as well. And realizing that some of the challenges a person faces is not permanent, they're not personal, and you can, by focusing on the right thing, you can overcome them. It just starts to help you to have a perspective. And I think I call it a social support system. It doesn't just come because I reach out to people for mentorship. I think the only way it works is that if I continue to help people, and the reason I say that is very important because on one hand, it may seem, oh, you are being a nice guy, but Eric, I think it's really, in some way, it is personally fulfilling to me too. It helps me to be a better person. It helps me to help somebody see their problem. They talk about their co-founder issue. I didn't have a co-founder in any of my companies, but I understand that. And I say, look, this has happened to companies before. You're not the first company, first founder that has a co-founder who wants to leave the company. You have to find a way. And there are people who can help you. It could be your board of directors. In one particular situation, it was their counsel, lawyers, because Silicon Valley is made up of an ecosystem where there are law firms, there are lawyers who have faced these challenges for their companies and their founders many times over. You know, the famous story about Facebook and how Mark Zuckerberg had potentially people who were co-founders or not, and then he had to overcome that challenges. I mean, these things have happened before. So same thing that I started by saying the medical student who wants to become a physician, a medical resident who wants to practice in Manhattan and wants to have a job the day after finishing the training. These are the same things to work backward. What do you do today to become that person you want to become? And same thing we ask ourselves as a company, who we want to become, and then focus, continue to stay focused. And there are distractions and there are challenges. And, you know, in a personal life, you have distraction because just because I am in Bay Area doesn't mean that if you fail, people adore you. They don't. You have to have, you know, society at large may be supportive, but you still have to endure challenges. You know, your family may be supportive, but you still have to find a way to make something out of that failure. So that is a personal conversation. So whenever I talk to CEOs, I always say there are two fights. One is the challenges you face outside, and the other one is challenges you face within yourself. You have to overcome both of these challenges.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of what you just said reinforces like why we're having this conversation today, because it's totally outside of a typical conversation I would get to have, and having a podcast and like where you want to come on and share these things with me. Like it's amazing because it's not about fame. It's not about listeners. It's not about any of that stuff. It's just about this conversation. Yeah, there happens to be a microphone and we're recording it and we'll distribute it and all that kind of stuff. And hopefully that'll lead to more conversations, whether it's with you or other people that are interested in having them, and say, well, this is totally outside my realm of knowledge. It's like, well, there's so much to take from this. and your own experiences. And like you said, people have been through all of it. There's books going back, centuries that we could read, and people have taken these ideas and just like they're right there if we just want to access them. And then there's individuals like yourself that are willing to have the conversation to talk about it. And just if we could take a step back and listen to it. And it's all changing too right now, right? And you used the word before, AI. And so you're in a space in biotech where AI's here. It's not going anywhere. And there's a lot of stuff in the news and a lot of stuff in the media, but you're coming at it from a standpoint of you're in the mix, like you're in the Bay Area. Like what's happening with AI when it comes to like what you're building and everything around it?
What you just said is how one can think about it. I think about AI as a tool, the tool that can help you to do things smarter, better. The human component is there, and I'm not going to talk much about AI versus human, but I think, Eric, in today's world, 20 years ago, internet was in infancy. There's a Web 1.0, then came Web 2.0, and then we talk of Web 3.0. I don't want to go too technical about it, but I think, Eric, saying that, well, we don't really care about AI is not true. In fact, in the biotech space, just very recently, with the new administration, there has been a lot more focus on AI with the FDA, Food and Drug Administration. So that's their AI for that. Physicians, how they practice medicine, is going to change. It will change because AI is there. The ability of a patient to be triaged is no longer going to be just relying on nurse practitioner, physician assistant, or the EMT. The basic questions, if somebody is having, it will be not impossible to imagine, not too far in future, you would have a AI platform, whether it's in the form of an app or you have a communication with an app and phone, and it can triage because we don't have that many healthcare professionals to triage. If you ever go to ER, ever, anywhere in the country, the ERs are like overwhelmed with the people who show up. Not everybody, as a physician, I can tell you, not everybody needs to be there. But by the time I get to patient number 7, who needs to just an antibiotic and he or she can go home, I have to get to that patient. But is it possible that these patients can be triaged, at least initially, by an AI-based platform? Answer is yes. So AI is a tool. Again, saying that it will replace human beings, no. But will it take care of some of the burden in healthcare system? Answer is yes. And it could make us more efficient? Answer is yes. Just like we use, internet today, and you and I are having this conversation. We are not sitting next to each other, but we are recording it, and hopefully this information becomes available to many, many more people. And this is for lack of a better word, it's a blessing of technology. So could AI be helpful to us? Answer is yes. Will it be helpful to us? Answer is yes. Could you use it today? Answer is yes. I use platforms, AI-based platform, to ask myself a simple question. If I hear about a new drug, I don't know a lot about that drug yet, you can keep on having conversational experience with the ChatGPT, for example. And I think one has to just be open-minded and say that I don't have to be the world's expert in AI and how to write the codes and platform, but can I start using them? And they're so user-friendly, Eric, is you don't really need a lot of background. You could just start using it. I started using it very early on. And I use it even today to ask basic things. Because look, in the past, if I was thinking about this differently, I would go to somebody in my team and say, can you help me analyze this new drug that is in treatment of kidney patients? But today, those conversations I can have with the AI, and I can find that information in 30 minutes that would take a human being maybe 3 or 4 hours. And I don't have to find that human being in my team. I could just have that knowledge available to me through AI.
How are, maybe it's 2 questions, I'll ask it separately. Physicians, they've been in the field for a long time, or they're in college and they're coming out of it. In many respects, people are, I don't know if they're afraid of it or they don't want to partner with it. They don't trust it. I mean, trust is a big word in this field, right? How have you seen people's response to it, maybe on the negative side, to say, this is not going to work, this is not going to help?
Yeah, there is a presupposition here that those who they don't like because they don't trust AI. I think that may be true for some, but I think there is this phenomena to say that, as an example, I'll say to you that if I go back to the time when I practiced as a physician, if you think that you will never need to have a physician, that is not going to happen. And that one could have a negative connotation to it. because physicians in the past, when we had a healthcare system where physicians were able to connect with patients, where physicians can make an eye contact with patient. I practiced medicine at the time when I had a new patient intake and I had a 35 or 45 minutes. I don't recall exactly, but I had 45 minutes to go through the entire medical record and have also documentation done. If I'm sitting where I practice, one of the rotations that I did, or one of the practices I had was at the VA hospital. If I'm practicing at the VA hospital system was very much organized in electronic health record. I had to fill up that entire medical record within a matter of 45 minutes. And you say 45 minutes is a long time. Not really if you are seeing a patient for the first time who has 8 or 10 different medical disorders. You have to go through the past medical history, personal medical history, social history, and you still have to be able to document. I bring this up to tell you where AI can be so useful. If instead of you as a physician, there was a platform that had already collected a lot of this information beforehand, then you as a physician can now spend 15 minutes of eye contact with the patient. And that is what physicians were supposed to do, to be able to help patients, not document things, because documentation is important. And I get that. I'm not saying that you don't, but the ability to make people feel better, right? Every physician has an opportunity to do so, and most physicians want to do so. But when the documentation becomes the overwhelming part of their job, it takes away what they want to do. And I think AI can help them. And I think that is where the modern medicine will go eventually. That when you sit down with your physician only for 10 minutes of the 45 minutes, for 10 minutes, your physician can look into your eyes and can ask you, Eric, please tell me what brought you here today. You say, doctor, I'm having headache. Okay, Eric, since when it has started? And I have the information. The AI chart is there next to me. It shows me that, let's not say Eric for a second, that Mr. Smith is coming in having headache because 6 weeks ago he had somebody, his family had a tragedy. So it is headache, all right, but it is precipitated by something that was emotionally challenging. As a physician, I know there is a natural response to something that is emotionally hurtful to us. I can help my patient, Mr. Smith, overcome that. And that part of the healing process that physicians were able to do, that was something which I realized was the most important part I could do as an attending physician. When I saw patients at NYU, I mentioned to you before, I used to take care of patients on the weekend, the holidays. My colleagues and friends who were physicians as well, they were doing this every day. But when I went and did my rounds, I would spend time, even if it is a couple of minutes, with Mr. Smith. And a lot of time, Mr. Smith, the patients like Mr. Smith will say, Doctor, this is the problem. Just being empathic and just listening to them and helping them realize that the problem, for example, I took care of patients after cardiac surgery, they have a redness of their chest wound, making them realize that, Mr. Smith, this redness you see, it may be inflammation. It does not necessarily mean an infection. And by the way, I am doing these 4 things for you. We are monitoring your blood count every day. So if there is an infection, we'll know. We are taking your urine sample every day. So we know if there is something that we'll see, we'll know. And the third thing is that these blood counts help us to understand that what you're seeing, this redness, may not be infection. If for some reason it becomes infection, we will know before it becomes a problem. That simple conversation and realizing, Mr. Smith, that I may look young, and I'm just saying it, that back in the days, a lot of time patients would say, but are you the doctor? I say, no, I'm one of your doctors, and I'm the attending physician, because they will see a lot of residents, and sometimes patients don't realize, but Mr. Smith, I've been doing this for 10 years, and I'm telling you, if there was a problem, we will be able to address it. I don't want you to worry. You should focus on recuperating in this while you are here. But I assure you, if there's a problem, we will know and we'll help you. And there are antibiotic treatments we can give it to you if there was an infection, but we are not there yet. Helping them understand this over a course of 5 to 6 minutes was probably the best thing I could do for my patient, besides starting for 35 minutes. So that is where I felt that there was a disconnect in terms of what I wanted to be a physician to do versus what physicians are asked to do. And of course, I don't want to go into that part of it because I chose a different path. But I think going back to your question about AI, there are physicians who realize that AI can help them. There are healthcare systems that, as an organization, I was talking to somebody from Sutter Health over this last weekend. They were speaking at a panel and they are utilizing AI in their system wide applications. So, those are the things where an AI can be augmenting healthcare, but it's not there to replace a physician per se. Because what I just explained to you, AI can do that empathetic discussion as well, but people want to feel that they can talk to their doctors. And unfortunately, because of the challenges in the healthcare system, that opportunity has become more constricted, right? If you go to your primary care doctor, first of all, you can't even find a primary care doctor if you're not in a ill health. If you want to get hold of your primary care doctor, is months and weeks away. Right. So we can make this better. And AI does not
Yeah.
have to be all evil. It could be an augmentation. And what I'm saying as a physician, the same thing is true for us and healthcare industry, biotech industry. There are many of the applications.
Yeah. It got disconnected and people would go to the doctor and they weren't being heard, right? My wife got diagnosed with celiac disease. It took 7 years because doctors didn't want to listen. They didn't want to hear about it. If AI had been around and they could look through charts and understand it and listen to the conversation, she could have had that conversation. She basically self-diagnosed herself and then finally found someone who understood it, right? But they hadn't studied that, right? And that's one aspect. But you hear stories all the time. So there was this massive disconnect. You talked about emergency rooms, right? So people are showing up and they have a cold. But I understand it because they can't get access, to your point, what you just said, to a doctor. And so now the hospital system's backed up. And then, when you go in, the doctor has 15 minutes because they have to get to the next appointment. They have 10 appointments for their day. My business partner's wife is a family physician, and they deal with that on a daily basis of like, how many appointments, how many people can you see? And so if AI can help that and allow that physician to do their job, which is, to your point, like have a conversation, sit down and listen, and then fill in the gaps where they need to be filled in. I agree with you. It's just, it got so far out of whack, and maybe AI is just going to help that to the next level, right? So that's a positive, and everyone should be on board with that.
Yep.
To shift gears a little bit, Vinay Prasad comes in at CBER. You're out here, you're working with the FDA, you're trying to get your drug approved, right? When that happens, and you brought up like, oh, AI, the new administration, where do you go with that? Like, I don't see you, for example, being disrupted by anything that's going to happen. Things are going to change. You've talked about this a lot. You're very resilient. You've seen it all. Nothing surprises you. Things are going to change anyway. Like, what happens at your company? What are you thinking about? What changes as you're trying to go through FDA approval? I think you're doing it right now. We're having this conversation. It's May of 25. You're looking for next month, I believe. But things are going to be ongoing from here, so we can always look back at this conversation. But yeah.
Eric, I'm an eternal optimist. I look for good things in the system. Some changes are good. Some changes can be sometimes a little bit disruptive, but I'm overall optimistic that our system, our healthcare system, our country at large will continue to evolve, and we will continue to get better. And I don't really have a immediate concerns. And what we can do is to work with the agency. Without them, you cannot bring the drug to market. And I think people sometimes just think about what you don't realize how much our government helps people. Really, I mean, it's a lot of work to realize to be able to say this is a safe drug to bring to market. So on a positive side, there are a lot of work many of our government officials do day in, day out with no recognition. And I think, like I said, I remain positive, optimistic, and focused. And to the extent there is something we need to do, we do at a company level. But I'm excited that our drug could be on the market soon. I'm excited that we would be able to launch the drug. And most important thing for us, both as a company as well as a human being, is to see that the drug could be on the market and help as many people as possible. And we think FDA as a thought partner, our partner, this is how I built the company. And I think of those of people who have listened to the story, 20 years ago, first time I went to my beginning of my career to the FDA, I felt they were actually very helpful and thoughtful and have been throughout this process in the last 20 years. I see them as a great partner and collaborator, and want to see how we can bring the drug to market.
Yeah. Well, I think we live in a world today where it wasn't that long ago where supply chain wasn't a word that people talked about. COVID happens and supply chain becomes the buzzword. Everyone's an econ major all of a sudden. Now tariffs is the big word. And when did the word tariffs was it talked about at, having a cup of coffee? It was never brought up. And all of a sudden, and you just mentioned it, these things are very complex. I listened to like a Ray Dalio talk and people were like trying to figure out, okay, what's the economy going to do? And a Ray Dalio comes on and they ask him, who's one of the world's greatest investors, like of all time, and he doesn't know. So if he doesn't know, but over here, this person's going to know. And I'm not saying people shouldn't have opinions and thoughts, but these things are in the media, they're in social media, you can't get away from it. And it's fascinating. It's actually a lot of fun to have these types of conversations about it, but they're very complex.
There is a component to it, Eric. There are things that, as you said, society at large, systems at large are trying to figure it out. And those are things which I would call they're not something we can control. So even in my own team, we say focus on things that we can control. And what we can control is to continue to stay focused on bringing the drug to market and then being able to get it to the patient. So I think because there is so much to do that I don't read news on a day-to-day basis. It's not that I don't read news at all, but I definitely don't watch any of the news channels. And I think it's not because I don't care, but it's just that there are a lot of, as you pointed out, there are a lot of noise, but remaining focused to things that we can control, recognizing no matter what, ultimately the company was founded with the basis of bringing the drug to market to get to as many patients as possible in the most beneficial way for the patients and society. And that, Derek, is also the way to create the most value for investors, for patients and physicians. And these are the three stakeholders. I started my first company with that, and I can tell you that hasn't changed. Without investors, we can't run an enterprise. Without physicians, there will be no one to prescribe the drug. And without patients and their convenience, we have no solution that will benefit. So these are three stakeholders. So that it doesn't change. And I think if we stay focused on that, you realize there is a lot to do there. So for me, the external noise of the changes and what is happening, it's important. We obviously are aware of it, but things that we can focus, we want to focus on that part.
Yeah. I figured you'd have a mindset along those lines, and it's good to reiterate that and hear it out loud. I didn't realize this when I was, preparing for this and just reading about what you're building and pill burden and how many pills that someone might take if they're going through it. This is outside of my understanding of everything, dialysis, and they're taking 10 plus pills, what have you, and then tolerability becomes a massive issue, right? Talk about that a little bit, because you've clearly saw things, you've worked with people, you understand this, and you see what an individual goes through when they have this. And that's why you're building what you're building. And that's fascinating. So talk a little bit about that.
So Eric, you are correct to say that you don't know dialysis market or dialysis patient. But if you were to go back in time and just imagine that somebody, distant relative, your friend's grandma, you would have encountered somebody in your either immediate family or extended family, or in your circle of influencers, circle of people whom you know, who have had to deal with a chronic problem. As a physician taking care of patients in a complex medical setting where a patient does not have just one problem, but a myriad of problems. One thing I realized that patients want to do their very best, what their physician prescribed them to do. But sometimes it becomes difficult because we are not talking about 10 pills a day, Eric. We are talking about 20 to 30 pills a day. And these are patients who are going to hemodialysis. So these patients have to go to a dialysis center 3 times a week. Every time a patient goes to dialysis centers, they have to wait for transportation. They get to the center, they sit at dialysis chair, and they are sitting there for several hours. These are the patients we are asking them to take 20 to 30 pills a day. And for the treatment of high phosphate, we are asking them to take the number of pills they're taking. On a lower end could be 3 pills 3 times a day. Higher end could be 6 pills or 3 times a day. So 9 to 15 or 9 to 18 or 20 pills a day. The fact that they have to take these many pills after each meal, one after breakfast, one after lunch, one after dinner, it's just a lot to manage. So people do it, and that it is not just this patient category, but people do things that they feel immediately alarmed with, things that immediately hurt. So for example, if somebody is having a chest pain, they don't have to be told by their doctors to take a nitrate. But if they are having an angina, which essentially means that their blood supply to their heart muscles is not adequate enough, so they feel pain in their chest, they will take nitrate. They don't have to be reminded by any app, any reminder. But if they have a high phosphate, which is not symptomatic, they don't get chest pain, they don't see any symptom, they will not take it. So the high pill burden makes people not wanting to take their pill, or they forget to take the pill, or sometimes they feel overwhelmed, but that's just the part. They don't take the pills, and that's where the problems start to arise. So the one set of solutions existed which require a large number of pills. Other solutions are there, which require a smaller number of pills, but these are large sized pills they have to chew, and the pill tastes horrible, like they're metal in them. So no matter how you take a look at it, these patients are suffering because the solutions are not optimal. It doesn't mean that they don't know solutions. I always say there are 6 to 7 approved, FDA approved drugs in this category of the treatment paradigm. Yet the compliance of the target serum phosphate level that patients are supposed to achieve, 75% of patients in the country have not been able to achieve for decades plus. So that just starts to give you the problem statement, right? There are solutions, but we have not been able to find 75% of patients that could achieve what they're able to achieve. And then the other issue is the other part of the equation is that we very strongly believe that our medications can help not only patient, but also lower the cost of care. So the equation where you're increasing the cost of care versus saving the cost of the care. The one part which is well known and documented is that when there is increase in serum phosphate, these patients are prone to cardiovascular mortality, but also cardiovascular morbidity, which means that they go to the hospital more often, 10 to 15% increased risk of hospitalization with each 1 milligram per deciliter increase in serum phosphate. So then it becomes that if we could design a solution that will help them take their pill, their phosphate levels are controlled, they will feel better, but they also don't go to a hospital, but they also don't have mortality. So for lack of a better word, it solves many problems.
What's the outlook as far as the drug being approved right now?
We have a couple of weeks from now, which is a PDUFA date, and we look forward to getting the approval.
So it's a confidence like that it's going to happen, or like that's the eternal optimist in you?
It's not just eternal optimist. We work with FDA. We have, so far, we haven't seen any challenges, and,
Any reasons why it would be?
and it's not a question of optimism. We work with them, and as I said,
You know what's coming. Yep. So then it's distribution at that point. So it's, getting it in the hands of the doctors right?
Yep.
And when you're building that and I don't know, it's a sales team, do you bring that in-house and you're going to have that people, or you?
We've added a few more people. We'll continue to add the people to be able to commercialize on our own. Absolutely.
Okay. And going public when you did, is going public a typical move for a company like yours? Is it typical that they'll stay private and wait? Like, what does that look like?
I could say, I think everybody has to do what they feel is the right way to build a company. Since I was founder, I felt that being in a public market would help me to be able to get to more number of investors and be able to have a broader outreach. So that was the thought process there.
Got it. And like having these types of conversations, I've noticed that you present very well. You're a great communicator. I mean, I'm just enjoying this conversation and learning a lot. Seen you on YouTube, you have a website, other podcasts that you've been on, you've been on webinars, you've hosted events, those types of things. Being a founder, being a CEO, right? All of that comes with going into storytelling mode a bit and having that outward so people can learn about you. And you use the word leverage. Obviously, like this is something that, I hear it, but then most likely a lot more people will hear it. And that compounds with all the other stuff that you've done. Obviously, that's a big part of what you're doing. You have a PR team that's helping you get on shows like this, right? So this is a big deal. It sounds like you're not just building a product, you're telling the story.
Absolutely. I think, Eric, my hope is that of all the people who listen to this podcast, even if one of them finds something worthwhile for them, you and I would have spent our time well and would have helped somebody. And helping somebody is also helping ourselves, because by being able to understand and help people face their problem, we understand more about ourselves. So I think it's something I would encourage no matter where you are in your journey. I think even if somebody who's successful and they built a startup company, they're 4 years into it, they can always pick up and help the person who's just starting or becoming an entrepreneur. So I think that's something which is very important. And I think that's what I'd ask my people who I advise. They say, well, Dr. Gupta, you've been so helpful. What can I do for you? I said, I appreciate that, but you don't need to help me. Somebody else is helping me, but you could definitely help somebody else who would need this. So it's passing it along. People call it paid forward, but I think there are a lot of ways people can help each other, because ultimately when we help each other, we as a society, and it is not bound by a healthcare, even globally, we help the word out there. And I think it is something which is powerful. And I think this is something which I started talking about this earlier, being a physician, seeing that you have a limited lifespan on this earth and might as well make something useful out of it and help other people. I think to me, it's very, very powerful. And hopefully we can do it together.
Yeah. It used to be become a doctor, you'd be a physician, you'd be a lawyer. You've been a physician, right? Now you're building a company. You were at UBS, right? You were in the finance world. And that's before, maybe a little bit before your time, because of what people are doing today. You could be a physician and have a YouTube channel. You could be a professor and be a tutor, right? And on it goes. And it could have nothing to do with your profession. You could have 2, 3, 5 different things. I think a lot of students are coming out of college and realizing like they're going to have multiple streams of income. They're going to be doing a lot of different things. Maybe there's one driving force behind it, but it's going to open up. And my guess is like you have a lot of knowledge, you pay attention, you have a lot of curiosity, like you said, your abundance mindset, it sounds like. Is that what led you down that path of like, well, I'm just interested in finance and that's going to help you? I mean, having that knowledge is clearly helping you build a publicly traded company.
Absolutely. That was the main thesis. It wasn't very grand master plan about to go to the banking, but it was helpful. I realized that bringing new products to market, especially in healthcare, is a complex process. So I felt very early on, the more I can learn, and there's curiosity and finding interest and also joy and learning new things. You can either be overwhelmed or you could be curious and excited about new things. So I felt that mindset definitely helps a lot to be able to run many things for many different people.
Yeah. Having said all of what we've talked about today, and we'll have a lot of people who they'll be in college, they'll be young professionals, they'll be aspiring entrepreneurs for sure, or just have that mindset, right? And like, okay, what do I do with this? And you obviously have talked to the people in medical school and young professionals and whatnot. But if someone was listening to this and maybe they have ideas of what they want to do and they aspire to be an entrepreneur, whatever that might look like, and what basic advice. I mean, and whatever comes top of mind. I'm not looking for like, here's the one thing that you have to tell everybody, but like right now, what comes to mind for you when I put that out to you?
I think one thing we can always tell people that instead of taking a path and feeling this is the only path I could take, talk to as many people as possible. And to your point, if you can't talk to those people today in today's world, you could listen to. If, for example, if you are a physician and you can't talk to me directly, but you could be based in Alabama and you may be a medical resident, and if your podcast reaches to them in 1 hour while they were on a weekend doing their chores, they can listen to something. It means inspire them. It may give them an idea that may help them. Hey, how did this person find their path from being a practicing physician to building a company? But that curiosity and seeking knowledge can help people. And, as a last thing I'll say here is that I remind my team also, even in my company, ask and you shall receive. But saying it differently, it's not my word, so please take no credit for it. But the receiving is given or reserved for the person who's asking. Ask and you shall receive, seek and you shall find. But the finding is also reserved or is for the person who's seeker. So be a seeker, be a person who asks questions. So I think that is the only advice I can give in the last 30 seconds, that be the person who's curious, look for information. Don't take things as they are, challenge them. And today's word, as you said, really like someone could just be putting their headphones on, listening to this in a podcast, wherever this episode resides. Way back in time, 20 years ago, that was just not possible. You had to read a book. But today you can be really running your weekend chores and, doing your laundry and listening to this. It's just amazing, right? So,
Yeah, it really is. I totally agree. That's why we do it and have these conversations with yourself. I mean, I appreciate it greatly, Dr. Gupta. How do people connect with you, learn more about you, listen to more what you're doing, and also to learn more what you're creating, building at Unicycive?
So Unicycive is a publicly traded company. We have the website, unicycive.com. My personal, what I do, which is most of it's very much related to what I do at Unicycive, but things I advise people give, seminars to Stanford students or entrepreneurs. Some of that is on shalabhguptamd.com, but I'm glad to be here and thank you so much for reaching out and thanks for asking questions about what we're doing with our lead product at Unicycive. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for your time, Dr. Gupta. Thanks for listening to Entrepreneur Perspectives. This show is produced by Quiet Loud Studios, where we create podcast writing and original media. Learn more at quietloudstudios.com.